bear that was booked by the NYPD Monday night and who goes by the name FrostPaw was not alone. He was one of the estimated 400,000 marchers in Sunday's People Climate March ahead of the United Nations Climate Summit this week. And after the big climate march, FrostPaw then took part in his second protest march billed as Flood Wall Street, designed to shed light on corporate America's role in climate change, and which organizers say drew thousands of people at its peak. Despite the bear's obviously good relations with local law enforcement, FrostPaw, who hails from the Center for Biological Diversity, was in fact arrested that night, along with about 100 others. Not just another pretty face, but a polar bear, so committed to nonviolent protest, he was willing to go to jail. And with me now, FrostPaw, the man behind the polar bear suit, Peter Galvin. You can reveal yourself, Peter, one of the founding members of the Center for Biological Diversity. So when they, I love the fact that they arrested you in your costume.
Yeah.
Did they book you in your costume and take a mugshot in your costume?
No, by the time I got to the police van, they had taken the head off.
So you were just in this kind of like Wookiee-looking situation.
That's right.
Did they paw print you or did they fingerprint you?
Actually, they didn't do either.
They just let you go.
They didn't let us go. They kept us in jail for about 8 hours.
Did you get a summons?
Got a summons. I have a court date on October 27th.
Okay, so in all seriousness, you are addressed to this. You're here because this is the big climate summit that's going to lead into Paris. And here's my question for you. You're someone who has spent years following this issue. You have this polar bear suit to go to these events. What should I look for when one of these events happens? Well, Copenhagen, it was the same. In Rio, it was the same. Mexico City. I'm just like so confused, right? There's just 150 countries, and everyone seems to be saying we should do something. And then the agreement comes out, and I'm kind of like, well, did this do anything or not? And I never know how to score it. And then I look to people that I trust. Like, what should I look for as this summit happens?
Well, we should be looking for specific binding emissions cuts from different countries, and we don't have that yet. And we
that's the holy grail, right?
That's the holy grail.
Okay. Binding emissions cut.
That's right. Specific binding emissions.
I'm writing it down. Specific binding emissions cuts.
And right now we don't have that. We have vague words, and without. One of the problems is, the U.S. never signed the Kyoto Treaty, right. And so the European countries.
Well, we signed it and unsigned it.
Well, we didn't ratify.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So. The European countries are a bit skeptical of committing to additional carbon reductions until the U.S. does.
Right.
In certain economic interests in those countries, and including in China, look at cutting emissions without another country cutting emissions, almost like unilateral disarmament. And so it's really critical that the U.S. actually lead on this issue.
But then the people in the U.S. will tell you this: oh, well, we're going to get left holding the bag. And this is the most sophisticated arguments that Republicans opposed to this make, is that they don't deny global warming. They just say, well, sure, okay, we're going to cut our coal and we're going to take the cost of that. And then China's just going to fire up their coal power plants and waltz all over us.
Well, the reality is, the U.S. is now the world's #2 emitter of carbon pollution. China has overtaken us. But if you look at the total amount of carbon pollution in the atmosphere, the United States is still overwhelmingly the #1 source of that
We use
pollution.
the biggest part of the budget.
That's right. And so the situation is that the U.S. has been a great leader throughout since World War II, the Marshall Plan. Some great forward initiatives have happened, but on this the U.S. has just not led. And the president gave a great speech, but the reality is his policies, his own administration's policies, do not in any way match up to that rhetoric.
And get us where we need it. And that's why us taking the step to say we are cutting emissions by this amount by this time, and that's binding. That's the gold standard. That's what we have to look for. Peter Galvin, a.k.a. FrostPaw, a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that is all in for this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show starts